Thanks very much for joining us for episode 51 of InTek Freight and Logistics, the podcast. I'm Kevin Baxter, joined by my co-host for this edition, InTek CEO, Rick Legore. Hey, Rick.
Hey there. Glad to be back.
And on this episode, we are focusing on an industry that has an imprint on day-to-day business and life in general as we explore the paper and packaging supply chain. To take us through all the ins and outs, we welcome our guest, Greg Lovensheimer, who is the president of Millcraft Paper Company and a chair of the National Paper Trade Association, or NPTA, a board of directors. Greg, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
So before we get into the overall interview, tell us a little bit more about yourself and your background in the industry. I know you come from a paper family.
Yeah, I'm a third-generation paper maker, if you will. So my grandfather started in the industry in 1920, worked in the industry for about 43 years. My dad had about 45 years, and they were all with the exact same company. And, one company throughout their life cycle. I spent the first 25 years of my life at that facility, although during that time frame, the name changed 3 times. And that's just a sign of the times, if you will. So right now I've got about 39 years in the industry, and it's an industry, I've grown up with. It's been incredibly rewarding to me and my family, and actually the communities in which we operate. And one of the things I love to say about this industry is there's more business that's done with a handshake and a relationship in this industry, unlike, any other. So it's a really great industry to be a part of.
Great. So you've been with Millcraft a while as well, but you're recently named president. So tell us a little bit more about Millcraft, and it's another one that has a pretty good history as well.
Absolutely. I'm incredibly humbled to be, able to pursue, self-actualization, if you will, Maslow's hierarchical needs, right? At a company that really cares about its people. That we are a 4th generation, 104-year-old family owned and operated paper and packaging distributor that's based in the Midwest and has Midwest values. And as you said, I'm the first non-family member to be president of the company. And so that's an incredible responsibility when you think about all the giants that came before me. And, I've kind of built the business to what it is and what it's become. But the wonderful thing is I have about 280 other family members that are incredibly talented that we can lean on to help us, kind of fulfill our life's mission. We say at Millcraft, we embrace the opportunity to make a meaningful impact in a variety of ways. And one of the great ways, especially this time of year, we actually have a philanthropic program called Buy and Give. Everybody buys copy paper, a little bit like bottled water, if you will. But one of the ways that we give back is through Buy and Give. So for every carton of paper we sell of that brand, we donate $1 to charity. And so it varies by the 19 locations that we have. Each of the locations chooses a charity that's important to them. And so this week and next week, actually, we're doing check presentations to a lot of the charities that we work with. So it's just it's a cool way that as an organization, we realize that we owe it to the communities in which we operate to actually give back. And that's one of the ways we make a meaningful impact. So that's a little bit about us.
So you have 19 locations, copy paper. What other types of paper are you guys into?
Yeah. So, we would put copy paper in along with business, school, and office. So copy paper, envelopes, kind of forms grades, if you will. We also do paper that you would see if you were at a restaurant. So a menu or a table talker. Store signage. So one of our biggest segments is in the retail signage, especially being in the Central Ohio market. So if you walk into a certain store, everything that you see that visually jumps off the page at you, that's a product we probably have our hands in, as well as the graphics that are either on the windows or the walls or the floors. Okay. Those are all paper-based products as well as packaging. So think about the plastic-free movement that's underway. Everyone is it comes full circle. Paper's now back in vogue all of a sudden as everybody, ran to plastics because it was lightweighting. What they've now realized is that paper has always been the sustainable option. And so, yes, things like pink chip cards. I just happen to have these in my wallet just because my wife's contemplating changing the color of our, living room. Well, this is a product that we sell, right? So we're one of North America's largest, folks that are involved in the paint chip industry. So when you go into a Lowe's and a Home Depot, all of that is a highly specialized paper product that we kind of take part in. That's produced, in the United States, actually in central Pennsylvania. And so it's a cool product that most folks don't necessarily think about. Golf balls, golf ball sleeves, right? That's
Right.
another paper product that we participate in. Or think about the unboxing experience that's all the rage now on YouTube, where people open a box.
Yep.
All that paper product there. The cardboard, as well as any of the interior, pouches and films and instruction manuals. So it's all part of those things. And then now even we have a line of business that's looking at direct to garment manufacturing, because there are paper products that actually part of that as well. So being able to do mass customization of T-shirts, there's paper products involved in that as well.
Okay.
So before we move on, Millcraft, you said 19 locations. You're in Ohio right now. Tell us kind of where you are spread across the Midwest.
So 19 locations everywhere from Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee is where, and sales office is kind of in Connecticut and West Virginia. But we actually have customers in all 48 states and 4 Canadian provinces.
Great. So you mentioned this at the beginning. You're also the chair of the NPTA board of directors. So tell us a little bit about that organization and what it does for the industry.
Yeah, so it's a great organization. It's actually committed to the National Paper Trade Association is what it stands for, and it's really committed to the paper distribution space. It's over 100-year-old organization that was started in New York City with 19 distributors getting around the table saying, how do we advance the cause of distribution? If you think about the supply chain cycle, you've got a forest. You're logging trees. Those trees then could go to an intermediate wood yard or a main wood yard, or it could be a wood yard as part of a paper and pulp mill. The fibers then turn at that point from kind of wood or standing timber into pulp, and it may get shipped off to a paper mill, or there may be a paper mill on site that then takes that pulp, turns it into paper. That's in mass quantities, and then because about 80% of at least American paper mills are in what would be classified as rural areas, you need these distributors to be able to, handle that last mile of delivery. And so you've got paper mills that rely on merchants or distributors who, buy in bulk and sell in discrete quantities, because the commercial printer, who's the next kind of rung in the ladder, is looking for an individual skid of this or a carton of this. So they don't necessarily have the ability to buy exactly in a mill quantity. And so that's what a merchant does, is buys in bulk, sells in discrete quantities, as well as amasses the buying power of the customer base in which they operate in. And so NPTA is all about advancing that cause of how do we help, what is the thought leading principles with regards to distribution, in terms of how do you take cost out of your system? How do you offer your customers the most, cutting edge services that are available? We have 2 conferences every year. We do one is kind of like limited to the executives within the industry, and that's really where a lot of the leading thought providers, we exchange information. So like last year we had a session on artificial intelligence in the distribution community and how AI is changing the way distributors need to think about data and information. And then we had the U.S. Postmaster, because about 40% of what we do in the paper industry actually goes through the U.S. postal system in some way, shape, or form. And so postal regulations have a huge impact. in terms of the paper industry. And so that's a kind of a January conference, and then there's a September conference where it's kind of a sweet trade show. It's kind of like where it's a major hotel, and you're able to see everybody in the industry in one location, and every hour you kind of rotate around to different suite meetings. And so those are the two anchor events of the association, but it's so much more than that in terms of it's also really trying to help our next generation of leaders. So we're blessed that one of the challenges we have as an industry is we're bad storytellers, right? We really are, and that people, when they think of the paper industry, they think it's that's in decline, right?
Right.
It's my grandfather's business, or they think of The Office, Dunder Mifflin, right?
I think we made it 10 minutes in before we talked about The Office. I was I was holding back on that, but
Was there an over and under? Yeah, and so that's the way my kids relate to what Dad does for which
definitely.
one are you? Are you Dwight Schrute, or who are you? And everyone's got their own personalities. But yeah, so you're always trying to overcome those myths. But it's an incredible industry. Like I said, we touch everything from like paint chip and a Lowe's to game boards to books. Actually, there's been a resurgence in trade books because people are realizing, I don't remember the things that I read in a Kindle. But I don't know about you, but I've got books that my grandfather owned, and he made notes in the margins.
Right.
That's cool, right? That to be able to read a book that your grandfather held in his hand, and he wrote something in the margins that makes you stop and wonder, what was he thinking when he wrote that comment, right? That's a connection to a past generation you're never going to get out of a Kindle. Right? I mean, heaven forbid, I'm barely able to recover photos I took on my digital camera in 2007.
Well, they say that it's hard to remember what you read on a Kindle because there isn't really a beginning or an end. And when you're reading, you capture, I saw it in the top right-hand corner, the bottom left-hand corner, and that helps you recall, what you read and comprehend it further.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a tremendous amount of studies to that effect. How about you? I'm a visual learner. I have to, if I see it, to your point, I can remember where it was on the page. So when the question comes up, I'm thinking to myself, and I can see the pages in my mind. On a Kindle, good Lord, good luck.
All right. Well, since we already brought up The Office, in some ways it was a positive, right? I mean, it gives you some sort of connection to pop culture and the zeitgeist. But yes, on the flip side, as you said, it was portraying an industry that maybe wasn't doing so hot. So what are your overall and what are your colleagues' feelings on The Office now that it's been off for a while?
So it's a great way to poke fun at yourself, right? Because in all of those episodes, there is a shred of truth, right? Yeah. There's always the one sales meeting that they had, or there's that one forced training that people had to go through that everyone thought exactly what The Office said. That's what everyone was thinking at the time. You had to go through that. So there's absolutely no doubt a shred of fact in The Office, and again, it gives us a great sense of identity to a degree, and it's absolutely a great way to have a conversation starter with the next generation of talent, because again, you can say, The Office, it's kind of like that, but slightly different.
Right. So you've gone over a lot of different paper products that are out there than some that people don't think about so much. Any others as you go through your day-to-day life? I mean, we in the business world, there's still a lot of paper that's very necessary, and I think people thinking about it, at work are pretty confident that paper's still important. What are some other applications that maybe somebody just doesn't think about that you give a big surprise to when you say, oh yeah, this is part of paper and packaging?
So there's some really cool applications, that we tell our new folks all the time. So in a fuselage of a plane, right? So in a Boeing plane, right? The fuselage is absolutely wrapped in a tape that is actually a paper-based product. that helps to hold in some of the insulation, right? So we're in the aerospace industry. As I said, we're in the game board industry, which is seeing an absolute resurgence.
Yeah, definitely.
We're battery pasting papers. So a lead acid battery, inside there are actual fiber sections to keep the different cells apart. That is actual paper, and over time those layers start to shed or degrade, and that's what causes your battery ultimately to short out. So there's always continuous improvement going into how do we make these battery pasting papers more durable. But again, things they wouldn't think that we're in the electrical industry, but yeah, it's absolutely in the electrical industry. We're in the aerospace industry. We're obviously in the building industry in terms of countertops. So probably the countertop in that office right there, if it's a Formica, it was cast onto a sheet of paper. The signs that the signs alongside the road that reflect. That's a product that had glass beads. It was a paper product that had glass beads that were cast onto that and allowed the glass beads to set up, and then the paper was removed. And so it's not actually in the end product, but it was an interim step that actually helped create that product. Just some of the things that are kind of top of mind. And so some of the really cool applications that people would go, I didn't realize that paper was even not part of that. Yeah.
Well, with it touching so many different industries, it's also much like the freight industry, is a leading indicator as to what's going on with the economy. So it's a industry that we like to watch along with ours to help pull them together to try to figure out, okay, what direction is the business going? How can we plan for it?
Yeah, absolutely, and there's no doubt. American manufacturing. Everyone gets enamored with GDP, but the really what I pay attention to is PMI. Right. In the manufacturing space. And you can, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that over the last several years, the industry's, the manufacturing at least has been in a contraction mode, not a expansion mode. And so the industry's tried to hold its own, over the last several years, still trying to digest some of the supply chain disruptions, that were brought on by COVID. And then you had, you had no demand with, excess supply, that the supply got taken out, and all of a sudden it popped, and demand took off because as everybody started racing back, and then there wasn't enough supply. And so you saw this bullwhip effect, I like to call, that really took place from, call it late 21 into early 23 of, no demand, all supply, and all of a sudden it flipped the other way around, all demand, no supply. And then it's kind of over the last, call it 8 to 9 months, the market's really leveled out in terms of supply and demand kind of being in balance. And so, yeah, it's been a certain challenge, and especially for our freight partners, to try to figure out, what is the volume that you're going to ship today.
Right.
Becomes challenging.
Absolutely.
So take us through a little bit about the freight strategy. I mean, you talk about the supply chain starting, as early as the forest, basically. But tell us kind of all sort of general overview of the steps of the paper supply chain.
Yeah, so it literally does start in the forest, right? And the reality is, at least in the United States, almost 65 to 70% of the forest land is owned by private landowners, right? It's the one thing that we're blessed with. Going back into the 50s, there was this thing called the American Tree Farm system. If you ever travel the back roads of America, you're likely to see this little tree symbol, and it said tree farm. And it meant that the owner of that property kind of subscribed to principles in terms of making sure they were taking care of the forest to take care of the next generation. And the forests are really nothing more than a crop that takes somewhere between 18 to 30 years to come to harvest, right? And that, a healthy forest is one that is constantly getting thinned and, kind of taken out. And so, the American paper industry, I think the number is, it's about 80 million tons. So that's, what is that, 3.8 million truckloads if you were to put it in a truck at one given time. So it's sizable.
Yeah.
But then you got to think that 3.8 million tons is actually multiple truckloads, because it's going from the forest lands to the pulp mill, and it's probably understaffed because we're going to get rid of bark. We're going to get a lot of the residuals. And so, that may be, 60% more weight going from the wood yard into the pulp mill of what we're actually going to use as fiber, because we're going to burn off the bark for fuel. And so you've got that step of the process. You're coming into a wood yard. So if you've ever been and seen a facility, especially a lot of the ones that are left over in the United States, at least now, tend to be fully integrated facilities, meaning they're going from a wood yard to a paper mill, because being all on one site, that's actually the lowest operating cost model. And so you're going into the wood yard at that point of a mill. It's being converted from wood chips, being ground up into chips, and then from going into chips, it's going into the pulp mill. And then there's another stream that's most people don't take into account. So most people think it's just the standing timber that's going through.
Mm-hmm.
Really, about 40% of the volume actually comes into the wood yard via chips from hardwood lumber sites. So as you're making dimensional lumber or other kinds of lumber, as you cut those down, you have chips. So they're blowing those chips into a trailer. The paper mills want that fiber, right? And so it's not only timber, standing timber, but you're getting chips as well, and that's what's kind of feeding the network, if you will. And then once you're made pulp, they may be drying it and selling that pulp, and then now you got another truckload and or rail car. A lot of pulp travels by rail because paper is extremely dense, and pulp especially packs well because it's a nice square, bale, if you will. And so, and remember I said earlier, 80% of the mills are located in what would be defined as rural locations. Yeah. And so the challenge you have is the mills are in rural locations. The end consumers tend to be in the, Chicago, Chicagoland, New York City, Philadelphia, Los Angeles, those big communities where commercial printers lie. And so you've got a lot of miles in between. And so the best way to ship is actually rail in a lot of places. And then the other nuance of paper manufacturing is you need a combination of hardwood and softwood to make communication papers. The papers that you and I read is a blend of hardwood and softwood. What's a hardwood? That's like an oak tree, right? So they're thinner fibers, shorter fibers, but they're smoother fibers. Softwood is it's coming out of the South. It's pine, right? So the difference between when you go to a grocery store and you've got a paper bag, that is almost completely softwood. So it's really strong, but you notice the print job on that bag is horrid. And it's because the fiber structure doesn't take well, right? They're long fibers, and they tend to be chunky as well. And so to make a printing paper, you need a combination of softwood for strength and hardwood to fill in all those voids. So it makes it nice and neat. Well, if you're a paper mill and you're located in, Wisconsin, you may not have access to all the softwood that you want. So you may have to go all the way as far south as Georgia to get the pine that you want. And so you're railing that pine up to the mill in Wisconsin. And then depend on growing seasons and whether you have a wet forest or wet winter or not, all the mills are scrambling around in terms of who's got fiber and where is it, and how do I bring it in by a rail? And so, you've got, rail and trucks coming in the wood yard. You've got, rail and trucks leaving the pulp mill. And if it's a pulp and paper mill combined, you've got rail and trucks that are pulling out of, the paper mills themselves. And then they're going into a distributor who's breaking down those large runs of product and putting back together kind of disaggregated loads. So it's an item of this and an item of that from a different supplier to make a bundled solution for that last mile delivery. So yeah, it's a early on in my career, I was exposed to the logistics side of the business, and it's just incredibly helpful. Just in terms of the paper industry is all about logistics, and there's some great organizations that I know the industry relies on in terms of the trading partners that we all have that are whether we're looking for dedicated freight, because again, there's challenges all around, and how do you kind of take out that variability, and really having partnerships on the freight side are extremely important to whether you're a paper producer or a merchant. You're trying to make sure that you have kind of fewer vendors and more important partners along the way.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that's so unique and interesting about this industry is there's the product, the paper product, and then there's all these different ways. I mean, you can ship the paper product in a paper product, and in terms of the packaging, and then as you mentioned, there are all these other uses that people don't necessarily see every day. But I don't think there are too many other industries that touch so many different areas.
Yeah, you would have to be thinking along the lines of a chemical industry to have a similar reach in terms of the things the way we all interact with paper on a day in and day out basis, and that's even with the mailbox decline.
Yeah.
Right.
There's just not that many catalogs. Although I will say this, if you probably noticed, the one company that was trying to get rid of catalogs, Amazon, they now have what? A Christmas catalog.
Yes.
So they've kind of come full circle.
And the kids like looking at the toys in the Amazon catalog, that's for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, my grandkids, they've got that Amazon catalog dog-eared like I used to have the Sears Roebuck catalog back in the day.
I was going to say the Sears catalog, absolutely. I remember that back in the day. Been a long time ago. But yeah, I've seen some catalogs come back. I mean, Restoration Hardware had a massive catalog that came out. So yeah, what I thought had disappeared, I see them starting to come back again.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's one of those things that, direct mail especially still has the highest response rate. It's over a 10% response rate, because with direct mail, so think about the amount how much decline you've experienced in your own mailbox. So now when you get mail, it's impactful because it is a rarity versus your email, right? I don't know about you and I, but I've got a spam blocker that's constantly looking at my inbox saying, don't even show it to him.
Yeah.
Right? Get rid of that, get rid of that, get rid of that. And even still, I go through and I'll eliminate things without even reading the headline. When you send a direct mail piece in your mailbox, you have to look at it to say, do I want to read this? Right? Well, especially if it's a postcard, you've already read it.
Yeah.
Before you've made that decision, right? So it's a wonderful way, and that's why it's a huge political tool as well. So we just came through the political season. That's a huge season for the graphic paper industry, just because there are so many. Think about, they had a $15 billion war chest, that they were throwing around, and it depended on what state you were in and whether you went in a tight race in terms of how full your mailbox were, or how, but I'd much rather get mail than blow up my cell phone.
Yeah.
Like, please leave my cell phone alone.
Agreed. Leave my email box alone.
Yeah. Well, as you
exactly.
said,
I didn't realize I was such good friends with some of these people,
Yeah. I mean, I think, a couple of examples here of a situation where 10, 15 years ago, people were saying, I don't know, like, everything's digital now. We're not touching paper anymore. And there are so many examples of how you just stick it out and all of a sudden everybody wants paper again.
Absolutely.
Well, the sustainability side of it is, it's come back around, as you said. We've moved away from plastics, or tried to move away from plastics, come back to, I'm assuming that the association is very focused on sustainability as well, trying to get all the paper companies together and come up with other ways to either push the product or try to find better ways to move the freight around for more sustainable supply chains.
Absolutely. So the one thing I'll say about the paper industry, especially in the United States, is we were sustainable before sustainability was a thing because it was about longevity, right? So if you think about a paper mill, the paper mill is bringing in these trees, and inside this tree is a lignin product, right? So the super glue that holds all the fibers together. Well, that stuff has a high burn rate. And so as you take the pulp mill from a kraft pulp process, to be specific, you're separating the lignin, the super glue, from the fibers themselves. And so then as that fiber gets separated from the lignin is actually burned in a boiler. So most mills that are in a kraft pulp process generate about 65% of their own electrical from that biofuel, right?
Okay.
So everyone wants to talk about biofuels being in vogue. They were in vogue back in the 1800s in the paper industry because it was a cheap source of electricity to make steam to, actually go make paper. And as you said, the industry, yeah, there was no doubt, not unlike a lot of American manufacturing in the 60s and 70s, we probably could have done better. And the good news is we've done better, especially with regards to water. The water usage in the paper mills can be high just because you're using water as a delivery vehicle to get the slurry from the pulp mill all the way to the paper machine, right? Water is that vehicle that transports the fibers along the lines. But now with the captive water systems, they're able to reuse water, multiple times over. And so it's an incredibly sustainable business model moving forward. Not only 60% self-generated, electric, greenhouse gas emissions. I think the number is, less than 1% of greenhouse gas emissions in the United States come from pulp and paper mills. So it's not what you would normally think. And then paper itself is one of the US's top recycled products. So paper is recycled about 65 to 70%. And cardboard or paperboard is more like 75%. And so that's the cool thing about paper and cardboard is you can continue to recycle it, right? It's not possible. People will say, well, why don't we just have 100% recycled? And that's, we'll never cut down another tree. There's error in that logic on a couple streams. One is because the fibers, not too much unlike textiles, you can only recycle a cellulose fiber somewhere between 5 and 7 times, and then the fiber just kind of shreds apart, and then it's no longer viable. It's considered a fine, and you're trying to hold it together so it helps with the opacity of the product. And then more importantly, we constantly need to be taking out trees. I tell my kids all the time, what's the difference between Georgia and California with regards to wildfires, right? Georgia and California. Well, in Georgia, they burn forests, right? They take out the wood. They claim take trees out of the forest. They burn the undergrowth. In California, they don't want to touch it, right? They want to, and so then what happens is you create this tinderbox where all this undergrowth, slowly dries out, and you've got these trees that are beyond their useful life, right? There's a certain point where a tree can no longer take on carbon, right? So they're all, trees are giant carbon sinks. Yeah. There's a certain point based on the tree species where it actually starts giving back carbon, right? It can't take on anymore. And so the absolute best thing for the environment is to take that tree out and plant a new tree, because that younger tree has such a carbon uptake, right? It's at such higher rate. And so the difference between California and Georgia is you don't see wildfires like you see in California because they're actually turning the forest over, right? It's, again, as I said early on, trees have a 18 to 30 year growing cycle. And so you need to view them as a crop, not necessarily as this thing you don't touch. And the other thing I would say is if you want to stop taking down trees and stop building homes, because, lumber for home building is the number one source of, the reason why trees fell in the woods.
Well, you have a similar conversation with maybe your friends about taking down trees that I have with some of my friends about freight. They complain about the trucks on the road, and I say, quit buying stuff.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Though you don't really want them to quit buying
Yeah,
stuff.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then I think about some of the we talk about freight in the paper industry. This whole East Coast port strike. While I would love to say that the American paper economy doesn't need imports, that's just not the truth. We need somewhere between, call it 20 to 40% imports because we don't have enough of a manufacturing base in the United States for a variety of reasons. Not like the fact that that there wasn't a lot of capital investment in the industry because of regulation. There's cost, you name it. Most of the world's top quartile manufacturing machines for paper, especially graphical paper, set in Asia. Right?
Mm.
That's just reality. And so we're constantly needing imports. And so the West Coast port strike a couple of years ago had a major tectonic shift. That's another, that was another actor in that whole supply chain debacle from 21 to 23. And then the whole East Coast port strike threat even, that was huge. And that's still not settled.
Right.
Obviously, the financial side is settled, but that whole conversation about automation, that's the bigger issue. And that's the issue that you'll see them come to loggerheads over, is the amount of automation that happens. Well, that's killer for our industry. And then there's the whole potential, tariff situation. That's the hot topic in the, when you're talking to some of the bigger end users is, what's your crystal ball say about potential tariffs and where does that mean, right? And then what I tell people all the time is it's just way too early to tell, right? You don't know what you don't know, and why would you speculate on something that is unknown? That's all you're going to do is get yourself tied in knots that may never ever come to being.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, so much of any kind of business is trying to look ahead. You want to act before you're forced to act, but there's so much unknown. As you said, the pure threat of a strike has a huge impact on the direction of freight and the strategy, the shipping strategies and everything. And then, the tariff piece is obviously another one where even with some more concrete stuff that came out, you don't really know exactly what's going to actually happen.
Absolutely. Just that threat of that East Coast port strike, we're an importer. And so we were evaluating bringing things into like the port of Cleveland, right? So there's one port that we can bring containers in. Obviously it's a higher cost model, but it was about securing our supply chain more than anything.
Mm-hmm.
So there were all kinds of decisions that were going on. And, I know that, several, importers were, routing things back to the West Coast and going to add timing, all to kind of eliminate the risk of having their freights stuck on the East Coast.
So in terms of, you mentioned AI. I think, every conference in any industry has had some AI topics. I've been to a couple of marketing conferences in the past year where it's AI, everything. So I'm curious, just a brief take on how you saw and how you see AI impacting your industry.
Yeah, so not too dissimilar to a lot of folks, right? So one of the great points of entry, if you will, in terms of adopting AI are things like writing a job description from an HR standpoint. If you're not using AI to help you write your job description, shame on you. It's low-hanging fruit. It's right there, right? Same way with marketing materials, right? Help you write a better marketing message or help you write a better letter. Again, shame on you. Those are low-hanging fruit kind of initiatives. So those are the easy ones. And then, one of the areas that we're really, looking towards, we continue to invest heavily in an ERP system. Because we believe the value is in the insights that we gain in terms of, we don't believe our customers probably know as much about their purchase patterns as we probably know about them. And so if we can take that data of their purchases, we can regurgitate it and give it back to them and say, did you know, here's how fragmented your spend was. And if you were to consolidate with a handful of vendors, we believe we could get you a better, a better rate, whatever. Not too dissimilar to the freight side of the business, right? You're spending this with 15 freight companies. You consolidate, you can be more important and leverage your spend. But we're also doing things like order entry, and so it's one of those areas, as you think about lean, where's value add? Order entry is not something your customers believe adds value. They have an order in their system. They're giving you that order. They don't see value out of you taking their order and putting it in your system. There's no value creation there. So what we've done is really work with AI to map whatever PDF you send us, to map that so that we know this is what you mean. And you may have described something completely different. You may not even be using our product codes or our catalog SKU numbers, but we've seen your order time and time again, and we've taught the model through big data that says every time I see an order that comes from this person and they order this, they really mean this, right? And you just repeat that pattern again and again and again. And what you realize is now, hang on, all of a sudden you're able to take your order entry that used to be 100% get a PDF and I have to enter all that information manually. Now it's 60% of our orders are coming in, they're mapped, right? And so that frees up. It's not about taking people out of the equation. We like to say we want to, systematize the ordinary so that we can humanize the extraordinary. We want to free up our people's time to really do value-added things like, I saw your order come through and I saw it had this issue, and here's what I've already done on your behalf to make sure it's not an issue. Customers will pay for that, right? That's value-added. And that's what you freed up that CSR to do because, you already took the data entry and got the data out of their system and put it in your system.
Absolutely. So tell us where people can find more about Millcraft and the NPTA.
Absolutely. So, Millcraft, we're on the, you can look us up on the internet, millcraft.com. NPTA is goNPTA.org. And then there's a couple of other organizations. So Two Sides is a great organization, and I'm actually a part of the board as well, that tells the other side of the story of the paper industry, right? It's what's called Two Sides, right? You hear all the negatives, but you don't necessarily hear all the positives. And so Two Sides, NA.org is a great organization as well. And they've got a lot of really great fact sheets just in terms of, how important the paper industry is and how sustainable it is, and all the other side of the environmental message of the industry. And then there's the American Forest and Paper Products Association, AF&PA, that's out there as well. So it's a great organization, and I like to say that over the years, the people that are left are the ones that are really genuine and have a passion for this industry and really care about each other, not only the suppliers, but their customers as well, and then the next generation that's coming kind of beyond us.
Well, great, Greg. We'll get those links in the description, and I think it's clear that you definitely have a passion for the industry as well. So we really appreciate you sharing that with us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we like to take a look at different industries, and I think this was a really great window into the paper and packaging industry with Greg there.
Oh, absolutely. And we got a little bit of science in managing forests and what that looks like. And it's not necessarily a bad thing if you're taking down trees, which is something that people don't really think about. But yeah, and talking about the leading indicators, talking about the economy, talking about just supply chain. And a lot of people consider, just when they're talking supply chain, they think it's just from their four walls out to their customers. They forget about the inbound supply chain and how to manage all of that. And clearly, the paper industry is has a very complex supply chain, and it was interesting to step through that as well. So, I always learn something on these, and really enjoy being a part of them.
Yeah, even going as you said, even a step further with some of the original source material comes from different countries too, so they're dealing with the imports. I'm sure plenty of exporting as well. We didn't get in touch on that. There were so many areas that came up that I had threads of follow-up questions on, but we only had so much time. May have to have Greg back on another time to go a different direction as well. But thanks very much, as always, for watching and listening. And thanks again to Greg Lovensheimer for taking the time to speak with us for this episode. So if you are a listener or viewer of this, please do comment, rate, and review us. Follow us, subscribe, however you get your podcasts. We really appreciate that. You can also email us at podcast@intechlogistics.com if you have any other questions or comments that you'd like a little offline, a little more private. And you can visit our website at www.intechfreight-logistics.com for more about what it is that we do here. For Rick Lagore, thanks, Rick.
Thank you, Kevin.
I'm Kevin Baxter. We'll talk to you again soon.